have the one and only Radha Mitchell with us today because she's one of the best actresses in not only here in Hollywood, but across the world and all the way to Australia, where Radha comes from. So welcome to Cinémoi.
Thank you, Daphna, and thank you for that lovely introduction.
Oh my God.
I appreciate it.
You know what? I said this to you before, but you're one of the only other one that is like that I've felt that way about was Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Wow.
You're one of the few actors that you actually are true to your character even when your back is to the camera. Mm-hmm. So my first question, before we get into who you are and what you're doing in this crazy world, how do you do that? How do you get inside a character the entire time and not lose it?
Why do you do it?
Why do you
do that? I think, acting, outside of the whole lifestyle of being an actor or an actress, is something quite magical. And it sort of enables you, obviously, to inhabit somebody else's point of view, but almost to have another lifetime inside of your lifetime. And it's almost something you can't explain, where you open yourself up as a kind of a vessel to you don't know whatever comes through you. So there's the period of preparation where you're kind of absorbing information, reading about things, like just sucking in information, like who is this character, what inspires them, what do they know, what's their background, how does that relate to culture in general. And a lot of that you can just do with YouTube. The internet's become this amazing resource to other worlds.
Information.
Just information. And then there's the text, obviously, which you kind of need to really imbibe. And then the magic of it is when you are on set and you don't know what's going to happen. You've done this there's the backtrack of work. And then, as it goes on, as you get older and more involved in a longer career, I guess, you've just got this catalogue of performances you've already done.
And lives.
And experiences you've had and
life.
other characters. So it's sort of cumulative in that sense.
But you've done some amazing, you've portrayed some amazing characters. And some of your movies we show on Cinémoi. One particular one that I think is such an interesting movie is Nobody's Baby. It's so far-fetched in a way, but so real from the other side.
So what about Kangaroo?
Kangaroo?
In your pouch.
Oh! Pie, I guess. No?
I would think milk.
I'll make it 2.
Do you want it warmed?
Yeah, that'd be good. Pie and warm milk, eh, gal?
Well, sit anywhere you like.
You're dealing with people who've basically lost their ambition. And they're living in a trailer park and have sort of become adjusted to a mundane way of life that they've accepted. And your character is with this guy who you obviously are in love with, or you wouldn't be with him, living in a trailer, and he's abusing you physically. And my question to you is, what does it feel like, and what does it mean to be afraid to leave somebody that hurts you?
I think it's a really significant question, especially in these times when women are finding their voices and men are sort of listening to their voices. And dynamics are shifting, and things we might have taken for granted in the past are now seen as pathological behavioural patterns. And I think even, the series Big Little Lies recently...
Right, which is the same as Nicole Kidman's character. Why did it take
Why
death?
Did she stay? And I think the success of that series was because that's such a pertinent question. What was the anchor? What was the glue? And why do we get caught up in these, negative scenarios? And I think that series does a lot to unravel those sorts of issues. And in relation to Nobody's Baby, you know, my character was very young. She grew up in the environment in which she was still found when the story begins. And I guess she didn't have a lot of support inside of her kind of family network. There was nobody really there. So she became dependent on somebody whose love was there or not there, and, you know, the extremities of that was something she'd learned to accept, I guess. So it was part of accepting that this is normal and hoping, you know, for the sweeter side of things, but enduring the darkness. And in the arc of the story, she finally kind of finds her strength.
Right, but it's very much like Big Little Lies in a way, because death ends up the salvation. Mm-hmm. And you actually end up killing him.
Let's not give it away, Daphna.
Oh my God, I forgot. No, okay. But anyway, the point is, it's not so much about the story is one thing, because a lot happens afterwards in the story. So his death is not the crucial end. Yeah. But the reality is that much like Big Little Lies, the Nicole Kidman character felt that it was a part of their sexual, you know, excitement. Yeah. But in your character, the pain was devastating to you, because you felt like so violated, not only physically but emotionally, that you couldn't even reach out to another human being. What did you tap into to get that? Because that scene with you talking to him through the window, to Skid Ulrich, was an amazing scene. Where did it come from?
Well, I don't know. It was a long time ago. But, I think I really, I just loved that character. You have to sort of love the character and feel and identify with them. And sometimes I think, especially in scenes like that, you've got to be careful not to victimize the character and be kind of the victim. And I have had actually in the sort of circle of stories that I've told, there's often been this sort of heroic victim character who is victimized in some circumstance, who then kind of overcomes the scenario and is heroic in her own life story. And in this case, I think she was heroic, but there were ramifications, and I don't know, maybe in retrospect, I haven't seen the scene for a long time, maybe played it a little hint too much self-pity, but I think she was just very in tune to the reality of what her sacrifice was in that scene, and also to the significance of why she made it to really help this little girl.
Yeah, no, but I think he also awakened something in her. Mm-hmm. He awakened the potential of real love.
Yeah, there's a love story there too, and it feels like there's another story outside of the story.
Yeah, so that was great. But, you know, it's interesting to me because you've acted opposite some of the greatest actors in the world. You know, one of the other movies that we have in Cinémoi is Thick as Thieves, where you are with Antonio Banderas and Morgan Freeman. Yeah. And in Nobody's Baby, we also have Gary Oldman.
Yeah.
And this incredible cast.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about, you know, the people that you've been, and I know you've acted with Gerard Butler, with Johnny Depp, with so many incredible actors.
Yeah.
So my question to you is it ever intimidating, or do you find the fact that they are great actors actually allowing you to open the door to something more vigorous within you?
Well, both, I would say. I mean, but certainly it's a collaboration, and there's no sort of singular performance. It's all about the people that you're exchanging energy with. So to be able to do that with people who are so experienced and so naturally talented always elevates your own performance. And early on, like in I think Nobody's Baby is one of my second or third movies, so to be around Gary Oldman, who was such an inspiration, was significant, and I think it did form my craft, just to have those influences.
Yeah, so you've had such a huge amount of movies that you've made, but who do you feel had the most impact on you as an actor or actress?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many different influences, but firstly, I'd have to mention Ali Sheedy, who I made High Art with, who
Why?
she was so embodied in the character, and she was quite willing to sort of mentor me in a way through the film. It was my first American film, my second film. And we were working in a really naturalistic tone with a director who had a very kind of clear vision, and in a milieu where we were very much reflecting the story we were telling, and she was just very in tune with it, and had this whole kind of Hollywood story behind her. It was strangely like reflective of the story in a way. She would like give me coffee every morning. I mean, just silly things. But she, I think it was just interesting to witness her performance, witness her really inhabit a character and not demonstrate the character, just be the character. So she was probably my first influence. And working with Denzel Washington on Man on Fire.
Yeah, what was that like?
Well, that was really interesting because he's such a potent and powerful actor. And I just remember I had X amount of scenes, and I thought that I like messed one up, and he's like, well, you just got to move on, got to go to the next one. And I'm like, but there's only one left. But he was all about being in the moment, and like, don't bring in an emotion that's not there. Be with what is there and play the scene with the reality of what's in the scene. Because I think as a younger actor, you're trying to create something that you think's on the paper, where he's very much about just being with what is happening in the room, which I think is very important in life as well.
Absolutely. I mean, the reality, which brings me, so it's interesting because in your own life, your mother was the top model. She was a photographic model of the year and top model and beautiful. And then your father was a director. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. So did you feel like early on that this was your destiny to be an actor? And how do you feel about this whole journey?
I don't know. I've always had the fantasy, like even when I was 4 years old, a friend of mine and I were both 4 years old, and we would dress up as specifically Hollywood actresses, and we were going to go to Hollywood. So that was like a childish fantasy. And then there was a few other ideas about what to do with my life in that sort of whole adolescent period. And then I went to Bali with my dad for a month after school and read Stanislavski's An Actor Prepares and had this very kind of serious idea of being an actress. But in order to finance the whole concept, I thought I would go to be on this like a soap. So I ended up on Neighbours in Australia. Then I ended up in an independent film.
My mom used to watch that.
That was on. It's still on. It's been on forever. So that was sort of where I learnt a lot, just on this soap for a little bit. And then, I had this independent film that went to Cannes, and so the plan sort of went backwards and forwards, but I did end up eventually and magically in Hollywood. But even then, I sort of have been more interested in the acting than in the
business.
The business, which has sort of always been a bit of a kind of an issue.
Struggle.
I don't know, struggle, just like a compromise, or just part of my journey, I guess.
And so I understand it, because the business is something that most real proficient actors find difficult to deal with, because it's, no matter how you look at it, it's never quite clear where it's at.
I remember I first came here, and I have a friend who's a German photographer, and she's like, let's do these photos out in the desert. And I said, okay, but I want to be an alien. And she's like, okay, so you can be an alien. So I got this like pink lame suit thing on and these alien sunglasses, and she ended up making kind of a career out of these photos that we took initially. And then 10 years later, she's like, okay, let's go back to that character and let's shoot it again. And I'm like, okay, but I want to be a commodity. And so there was initially that experience of feeling like an alien, being an alien, like having the alien residency and whatever paperwork is when you're an alien in the US. And then seeing it sort of all play out and feeling like I had become, on a certain level, a commodity.
Right.
Which, again, is something you have to sort of work with the reality of. It's just part of the whole thing, I guess.
What's the positive of being a commodity?
I don't know. I mean, if you take control of it, and I think what you've done with the network, obviously, is work with this whole idea of marketing art. So if you see yourself as a product and market the part of you that you want to continue to work in that sphere, then, perhaps you can enjoy it.
And what is the negative part of being a commodity?
Well, I mean, the negative part of being a commodity is that you feel like there's a price tag on your soul.
That's a very interesting subject to explore. And I agree with that. I mean, It's not just as an actor, but it's directors, it's writers. Mm-hmm. So how do you work with that? How do you come to terms with that or to peace with that?
I think firstly, you just try to work on things that inspire you. And then you try and let other people deal with selling you.
So you separate yourself. But in the selling of you, there's also a compromise, because then you can't choose the artistic part of it.
Well, yeah, it's a business, right? If you can extract yourself from the business, then you're probably working in independent cinema. You may or may not have movies that get released, but you may really enjoy making them. And I think when you reflect on your life experience, at the end of it, you'd be like, did I enjoy the moments while I was living them? And that's probably, people find their own meaning, but that could be a solution.
But do you think that the art of acting has been the journey of your life too much?
I think it's always been a little bit here and a little bit there. So a bit here and a bit there, and I'm amazed that it continues, considering that I don't put a lot of effort into the marketing side of things. That there's this, it continues.
That's because you happen to be a great actor.
That's debatable, but I've been lucky too. Yeah.
What do you think? What do you attribute to luck? What movie do you attribute to luck?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the very first one, Love and Other Catastrophes, was a tiny little movie that my friend's dad spent $40,000 on and got sold for $1 million to Searchlight. Like, that just, never happens.
And after that, what film do you feel that was a gift for you, that you felt like really enriched your life?
Well, there's been a few. Certainly a movie that you've seen. A movie
Priscilla?
Well, the movie we shot in India.
Oh, yeah, I love that one.
The Waiting City. I traveled in India when I was younger, and I'd always felt like I'm going to make a movie in India, and I'm going to make a movie. And then somebody invited me to make a movie in India. And the people I met on the project, some of whom have become like dear friends of mine. And
who's in that movie? I forgot.
Well, Joel Edgerton's in the movie.
Yeah, he's great. That was his first movie, wasn't it?
Well, not his first movie, but one of his earlier films, yeah. And then Jamie Hilton, the producer's become like a very dear friend of mine, and Claire McCarthy has become like a very interesting director out of that project. But it was sort of this sort of amazing situation where we got to tell a story set in Calcutta about this couple who were going to adopt a baby, and the sort of their loss in that situation, but then what this woman gains on a spiritual level. It was kind of subtle storytelling, ambitious storytelling, and it felt like this kind of blessing that suddenly we were there
You
making
know what?
the movie.
The reason that I wanted that movie, particularly for Cinémoi, is because that movie opened my eyes to the amazing reality of adopting babies from India. Because there's so many babies that are up for grabs, basically, over there. But yet, the system there is so difficult.
It's very bureaucratic, very difficult if you're not Indian
And
to
it's
adopt.
not in the best interest of the child.
That's a conversation that they're with in India with the way they manage things. But it was certainly reflected in the story.
It was very, very good, the way it was handled, because it wasn't overbearing. It was as a part of the breakup of the relationship between him and you.
Yeah, and it's also a story about not getting what you want. And in a way, it's a story about failure, which are not very sort of Hollywood themes. But what this woman gains in the failure is sort of very, very deep. So I really liked what the story was trying to sort of access.
So, Radha, you have you've done the impossible, actually, because you were determined to do movies that you really feel something deep about. And so you've done a lot of independent movies, which normally actors, as you said, that enter it, and you call it luck, don't sustain for a long period of time because that side of the industry doesn't emphasize growth as much as the side of the blockbusters. But you've managed to sustain and grow. But my question to you is, if you parallel your life to your acting career, what is it about your life that you feel had, sort of detours that surprised you and allowed you to grow in your own life?
Oh.
I mean, relationships, environments, countries, and influences.
Well, I still feel, even at my age, at this sort of adolescent moment in my life. And I think what I've been able to do is just sort of keep this sense of openness about the possibility of what my life could be, which is sort of adolescent, but it also gives me this sense of internal freedom. And in the journey of it all, I've been, and also through acting, but also just through personal curiosity, I've pretty much seen most of the world in many different countries and different kinds of ways of living. And, I've had this sort of spiritual journey that I've been sort of curious about that was sort of inspired by my mum. And my dad's been living off-grid for 40 years, so I've sort of stepped in those steps as well. And then even through you, Daphna, I've met some incredible people who were very influential, who were doing amazing things to sort of evolve consciousness, evolve politics. So I feel like I've had a kind of pretty broad perspective on things, like a palette to paint my own future with, but also to paint these characters with.
So do you feel like it's interesting that you use the word adolescence.
Yeah.
Because it actually describes you. There's no rhyme or reason.
I'm just being honest.
I know, but it describes you. So where do you want your life to go now?
Well, I don't know if I want to announce it on television, but
I mean, you don't have to be specific in terms of
I think the future of where the focus will be is much more about sort of where I've come from, my family, and there's been so much, and you probably experienced this as well, there's so many different facets of your personality. You look for ways to bring them together. So it was really lovely to spend New Year's and Christmas with you in Melbourne.
It was so exciting, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody will want to know. So it was like, tell them about the experience of having fireworks from every corner and every potential place in the world, being in a high-rise over a river.
We were in a building that we were supposed to see the New Year's, what do you call that? Fireworks from. But we didn't realize we were in the building that the fireworks were going to explode out of the building. So we were like, it was like being in war, really. I don't know, I'm screaming out the window, Happy New Year!
There must have been 1 million people screaming Happy New Year.
I don't know, it was pretty epic.
It was. It was my only experience like that in my entire life. And it was so interesting because your mum and dad were holding hands.
That was so cute. Anyway.
So is there anything about the movie Thick as Thieves that you want to tell us about? Morgan Freeman. I saw the movie.
Oh, yeah.
And, and Morgan's playing your godfather.
Yeah.
And they're both criminals.
Oh, shit.
Are you with him?
I don't know. Should I? More or less. Yes, I am.
What do you want?
Can't I bring my goddaughter a birthday present?
My birthday was last month.
It was 2 weeks ago. And I'm sorry it's late. Alex, it's just a present. No strings.
No thanks. Well, it was nice to have almost met you, Gabrielle. Gabby? It's a shame you don't keep a higher class of company.
It was actually directed by Mimi Later,
Right.
And talk about women filmmakers. I'm like, wow, I've actually worked with about 8 or 9 women filmmakers in which seems sort of normal to me just because that was my life, but actually it's quite a unique experience and quite special. Anyway, Mimi, she did, I think, what's that? Oh, ER. Was it ER? She was like one of the conceptual directors for that show. And this was a movie that her brother wrote. And she was lucky enough to have Antonio Banderas in the movie, and I was lucky enough to act opposite him. And have Morgan Freeman to work with also, who I'd worked with on a Robert Benton movie. So we were kind of working together again. But yeah, it was actually really great to watch Antonio Banderas work, because he does have this sort of magical, nobody else performs the way he does. It's something unique to him. And I was reading some review.
What is it exactly?
Well, I was reading a review of his work, and someone described him as peerless. And I was like, peerless? What does that mean? So I Googled the word, and it means obviously there's nobody like him. And there is nobody like him.
Yeah.
Except one person.
Yeah, Maria Conchita Alonso.
Exactly.
It's true.
They have this Latin flair, and it's just a kind of a way of being. There's a sense of humor about it, and there's a cadence that is so unique and so fun.
Thanks.
I thought all Russians drank.
Translation, we're a race of suicidal alcoholics.
No, I didn't mean that. No.
Actually, we are. Cheers.
Nazdarovia.
Nastarovia.
Nazdarovia? So, how is it working for the lawyer?
Huh. I'm a lawyer too, you know.
Maybe I won't say another word because everything I assume is wrong.
Well, you don't know until you try.
True.
And besides, my father warned me about being a lawyer. He told me I should try and do something honest with my life. As if he would know.
You know, I want to ask you something, because this is really at the core of so many women actors who are really good. Beauty and body. It's interesting that, you have to get beyond the facade to be an actor, and beyond beauty to be who you really are at that moment. But you also have to be fearless in terms, I think it's in As Thick as Thieves, you walk naked at one point.
Oh, yeah.
Where do you get that?
No, I don't. That's in another movie.
That's in another movie, okay.
Yeah.
I get them all mixed
No,
up.
that becomes like a whole legal issue.
Yeah.
You sign documents. No, there's one movie where I did appear naked. And that was kind of experimental on my part. And afterwards I was like, I don't need to do that again.
Was it fearful
It wasn't fearful. It was just like, whose eyes is this for? And I think the intention of the movie, it was Robert Benton's movie, is that this is going to be kind of have a European sensibility. And we're making an honest story. And I'm naked in this scene where I'm fighting with my lover who's cheating on his wife. And
wasn't that with Morgan Freeman too?
He's in that movie, yeah.
Oh, I thought so.
Because it's called Feast of Love, and there's like I think 4 different love stories. And Morgan Freeman's love story, him and his wife who've lost their son, and then mine, I'm sort of in the mid-30s love story of this couple who are sort of in this adulterous relationship. And then there's this young love story. And then I think there's a lesbian. Anyway, whatever. There's a few different love stories. And so it's an examination on how we lose our minds in this kind of funny Cupid story and what it all means and doesn't mean anything. And in this scene, we have this fight in the nude. And I was like when I read the script, I was like, yeah, but does it have to be in the nude? And they're like, yes, everybody has to be in the nude in this movie. You either decide to do that or you don't. So I thought, well, okay, I'll try it. And it was very uncomfortable until the clothes were off. And then when they're off, you don't care. You're just there in the room. But getting up to that moment was extremely uncomfortable. And then in reflection, I did this interview for a GQ magazine, and the guy wanted to talk about this movie. And he was like angling me, what's it like to be naked in the movie? And I was like, well, you know, I'm actually imagining you naked right now. And I'm like, and I see you as a young boy on the beach, very pale, and sort of just kind of infantilizing his nudity and bringing innocence to it. And just saying, hey, this is how we live, you know, in real life. We're not walking around covered in clothes all the time. And so sometimes it's interesting to see that in cinema. And at the end, I think the conversation went a little weird, as I was quoted as having said something like, God, the big vagina in the sky.
That's a great concept, actually speaking. But you know, also the thing about beauty, because you came into the scene and everybody thought you were like the next Grace Kelly because of your beauty. And it's really hard to have that as your passport through life.
I think it's really beautiful. Hard and it's really easy too, isn't it?
It gives you opportunities.
Yeah, it opens a door. But then it's really hard to age, I guess. That's the other thing.
But not only that, because everybody sees this.
Yes, but I wouldn't say that's hard. I would say that's easy. I think.
What's hard?
Well, yeah, what's hard? Everything's hard. I mean, everything that's important is difficult.
But you find that in your relationships, the facade of being so beautiful is something difficult for men to get past?
Well, I don't think I'm that beautiful, but...
you are.
Well, thank you, Daphna. What was I going to say? I think that what's interesting as an actress, obviously there's an aesthetics to the craft and there's an aesthetics to cinema. Like, we want to look at things that look nice. And I think it's going to be interesting, and I think having women directors is going to make a difference in the future, how we're going to represent women as they age and show the beauty of that too. And I'm quite interested to be part of that story, you know,
as I age. But yet there's a big fear of that in almost very few actresses have been able to cross that river.
It's interesting. I'm curious about it.
Like Meryl Streep, for instance.
Yeah, well, she's a prodigious talent, so she could just go anywhere with just, you know, she could even be the president. But even recently I did a movie called, it hasn't come out yet, Asking for It. And it's kind of a Me Too reaction story in a way about this young woman who's raped by a friend and joins this vigilante group of feminists who are going to bomb this establishment with hormones. And it's pretty funny, like darkly, it's got its own sort of tone, which is quite humorous but quite serious. And it was interesting because the role I was playing was the leader of this group, And there was total lack of vanity in it. And having just so many women in the story, I think, helped create this non-competitive environment where authenticity was more the focus.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Which brings me to a question. And you've shot a lot of movies lately and a lot of things. Where is it all going right now?
Out there or in here? Like
out
out
there
there,
and in here, and what are you doing in your career and your life?
Where is it all going out there? I don't know. It's changing. The media seems to be changing. There's moments of reflection. I just went to Sundance and rescreened this movie, High Art, which we shot 20 years ago.
You guys got so much publicity on that.
But it was funny to reflect and then see everybody 20 years later, and it felt like there was no time. It's just like 20 years, wow. Everyone's still kind of the same. I don't know if anybody's learned anything, but we're still going. And that was kind of fun. But also to realize that there was that moment in the 90s where there was a kind of a cinema that maybe isn't getting made now. And I was lucky to have been, around at that time. And now I think obviously the space where interesting things are happening, is the streaming world. And these sort of long format storytelling and short format. There's like 15-minute movies that are getting made. That's all interesting, that we're recreating the format.
But it's kind of cutting down the whole idea that movies are about storytelling. And 15 minutes, you basically focus on sensationalism because you're appealing to the 10 seconds attention span.
Well, let's see. We don't know yet. I feel like what's cool about it is there's an open-mindedness. Like even I've spoke to producers at Facebook that are producing content, and they're like, we're just asking people to bring things in. We don't have a strategy for the format yet. We're just looking.
Yeah, we are actually going to submit a short documentary film in Cannes ourselves, Cinémoi. So it's an interesting arena to kind of temper into.
I mean, the romantic side of me still loves cinema.
Yeah.
And classic cinema. And the sort of the romance of the hour and a half and getting lost in the movie theater. But sort of really excited also to see what comes out of the future.
So what are you doing right now? What's on the plate?
Well, I don't know when this is going to screen, but tomorrow night I'm on the longest American TV series that's ever been on television. I'm in episode 15 of season 21, something like that, which was really fun.
That's the Law and Order one.
Speaking of working with women, Mariska Hargitay is an incredible actress who I was acting opposite, and directed by Radha Mitchell, who's not a relative.
I love her.
Yeah, but so that was cool. And then there's these few independent films that are coming out. One asking
But your
for
character apparently in the Law and Order is amazing, and
Great
everybody
role.
thinks
Yeah.
your performance is Emmy Award winning.
Well, I don't know about that, but that would be great. Yeah. And then I didn't tell you this yet. No, I won't talk about it yet. There's a possible directing opportunity, which could be exciting.
Yeah, with your experience, it'll be helpful to the actors. Tell me about the character. You're playing some insane person or something on Law and Order, right?
Can't give it away, but she's a CEO of a company who's framed, and they gaslight her into believing something that may not be true. And
wow, that's
she's
kind of
person.
current news right now.
That's what I see. I read it and I was like, wow, this is so fantastic and topical. And then they're like, oh, it's special, what is it? SUV, special units, something. Every episode is about a female as some sort of victim in that world.
Oh my God.
I didn't realize. For 20 years, that's the story they're sort of exploring. So they're kind of been on the pulse way before anybody was ready to talk about it.
I didn't even know that. That's really interesting.
It's interesting.
Because it's very current, all these investigations that are going on.
Yeah. As we were there, Harvey Weinstein was on trial, and in New York this is.
Even the justice system has become a reality show.
Yeah.
Which is so sad.
On that note.
On that note, I want to thank you so much for coming here and
Thank you for
chatting.
inviting me. Good to
I
see
adore
you.
you. Oh.
All right.
Anyway, we're so excited about the movies we're showing of you, and we're going to do a whole Radha Mitchell festival right here on Cinémoi. And say something about Cinémoi.
Oh, Cinémoi for lovers of good films. Tune in.